Hello there, my name's Card, and here on my YouTube page, I like to make simple little videos about topics I'm interested in. Today, I just want to talk for a little bit about the 1999 Stanley Kubrick film Eyes Wide Shut, and why, I would argue, it suffers as both an adaptation of a pre-existing novella and as a work in its own right, because of a fundamental disconnect between the contents of the final film and the themes I think it's very reasonable to take as read that Kubrick wished to convey. I'm principally making this video today for people already at least passingly familiar with Eyes Wide Shut, because I don't want to have to retread the whole plot. But just as a reminder, this is the one where the well-to-do New York doctor Tom Cruise starts to become insecure about his marital life and finds himself enmeshed in the dreamlike world of high society masked drugs and sex parties. If you're basically aware of the film already, if you've seen it at least once before already, that should be all the familiarity with it you need. But I also just want to make sure everyone watching this is aware that Eyes Wide Shut is actually an attempt to adapt an Austrian book from 1926 called Traum Novelle. And in all the basic ways, with regards to all the original book's narrative beats and such, Eyes Wide Shut is a pretty faithful adaptation. Although, of course, the setting is made contemporary 90s New York City and not early 20th century Vienna, and a few names here and there are modernized and so on. But it's largely a straight page-to-screen adaptation. But here's the thing. The actual themes of Traum Novelle are lost in the translation from book to film, and not necessarily just because of the change of medium, or because of any specific change Kubrick and co. made, but because many of the more subtle elements of the novella Traum Novelle just aren't something that modern audiences would receive in the same way readers in 1926 would, even if they still recognize the basic outline of the plot for what it is. Because Traum Novelle, and by extension Eyes Wide Shut, is at its heart a story about this smart young doctor who, despite having a good job that pays much better than most jobs, and despite having the respect of his peers and a loving wife and daughter, is distinctly aware of the real heights of wealth and power and opulence far above him, and his complete and utter inability to contend with or grasp at any of it. A lot of the angst of the main character in Traum Novelle / Eyes Wide Shut comes from how he works himself up over comparing himself to these uber-rich people he happens to occasionally briefly rub shoulders with. He may have a top 1% salary, but they've got multi-billion-dollar generational wealth. He's got a nice upmarket townhouse. They've got palatial mansion estates. He's got a beautiful young bride. They're throwing nightly bacchanals with hundreds of exotic escorts. But, very crucially, in Traum Novelle, the subtext is that the doctor character is a stand-in for Europe's assimilated Jews, and the wealthy, powerful billionaires are the wealthy, powerful, landed white European Gentiles. In Eyes Wide Shut, that's not really the case. The Tom Cruise character isn't played as Jewish, and I'd argue that even if maybe you got in a different Jewish actor and rewrote the script a bit to emphasize his Jewishness or Jewish codedness, the 1990s Western culture that the portrayal would still be being made for isn't one in which being Jewish still carries that same sort of outsider status. Eyes Wide Shut is retelling a story about the Jew as the perpetual outsider, but totally divorced from the context of the source material, which is why it ends up as one of the weaker of Kubrick's movies. Granted, I'd still say Kubrick at his lowest is still a really good filmmaker, but this is why I think a lot of people might come away from Eyes Wide Shut confused about the message it's attempting to convey. Without that specific context for why the Tom Cruise character is meant to feel specifically alienated from the world around him, a lot of the symbolism Kubrick carries over from the book is lost. Take, for instance, a really prominent recurring motif of the movie that is lifted straight from Trom Novel, all the Christmas stuff. Kubrick makes the choice to intentionally set Eyes Wide Shut around Christmas, so there's a bunch of Christmas trees and decorations all throughout the film. In the setting of the book, this is meant to reinforce the idea that the protagonist is living in a decidedly Gentile world. Also, at the time the book was written, Christmas trees were still a relatively recent tradition in much of Christendom that also still had a few mildly pagan connotations. Either way, it's all decidedly non-Jewish and anti-Jewish. But in the movie, in the context of the Tom Cruise character being a regular 1990s American, Christmas trees are just a perfectly normal thing to be around if it's that time of year. The setting of the movie keeps the symbol, but it no longer has the associated symbolism. More explicitly, at one point, Cruise's character is briefly accosted in the street by some random frat bros who call him gay. Here, it's probably one of the few meaningful scenes I'd be allowed to show on YouTube.
Hey, what team's this switch hitter playing for?
Looks like the pink team,
This
huh?
faggot.
Faggot?
Merry Christmas, Mary.
Hey, hold on. My brothers are back there. They prime cut of meat, baby.
You want to take a ride in this bike, Kelly, you stupid faggot?
Looks like we got a moon puncher
Man,
going
you
on
should
here,
have
huh?
kids just standing so close. Get out of here.
I got dumps that are bigger than you.
Come on, Macho Man. Come on, Macho Man.
You want a piece of this, baby?
Exit only, honey. Go back to San Francisco where you belong, man.
The point of that sort of scene is just to show that the world of the story is ambiently hostile, whether the harassment itself is warranted or not. The movie gives those guys some realistic 90s homophobic dialogue to say to Cruise in passing to stir him up. That scene's in the book, and it plays out much the same. But in the original text, they're university students who mumble a few anti-Semitic comments as they pass the doctor on the street. Still, even without the explicit coding of the main character as a Jewish archetype, there is still a lot in the movie to reinforce the idea that the main anxiety in the protagonist's life is how much the wealth and power of others that he can see but not take for himself overshadows his own life. But I think it just falls somewhat flat, particularly for American audiences. There might be something to that old notion that Americans like to think of themselves all as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. To them, seeing a massive fancy mansion and its wild parties isn't entirely off-putting. To them, it's a little bit aspirational. How many people might have watched Eyes Wide Shut when it came out, and they see it for the first time and come away thinking that the masked sex party looked cool as hell? It's not meant to be something you even necessarily should want. But either way, the point is, that sort of opulence is way beyond your reach anyway. And the subtext of the novella, Trom Novel, is that the heights of power aren't accessible to outsiders, to that cultural, racial, religious, hierarchical world the story was written and originally set in. But it's adapted into this modern movie where now the plot involves essentially anti-Semitic discrimination, stripped of its overt anti-Semitism, and not even happening to a Jew. And most people who see the movie don't know anything about this 100-year-old book it's based off of, so they just come away confused. If you want to make a comparison to a more recent film, take a look at any of those Jordan Peele movies. They're far from subtle, but the idea is that he does horror and thrillers where the theme is clearly American white-black racial animus. So in a film like Get Out, the protagonist can represent the effects of systemic racial inequality and prejudice personified. But imagine if instead of being a black man, the protagonist was Irish or Italian or something, but the movie was still being made basically here and now, modern day. The moment has sort of passed in many ways for that to be a meaningful cultural or racial signifier. But now imagine something like Get Out or Us, where the protagonist is nominally Irish or Italian, but still being played by just a regular Anglo-American actor anyway. That's what Eyes Wide Shut feels like for Jews. Oh, your lead character is a Jewish doctor in modern New York? Such an outsider there, huh? And he's played by the most conventionally attractive Gentile you could find, and we never even mention he's supposed to be Jewish? Rad. Perfect. It is what it is. Some old stories just can't be adapted all that well today. It's still an alright film at the end of the day. And if you take a look at a lot of Kubrick's work, especially stuff like The Shining and Full Metal Jacket, it's pretty clear he's not afraid to deviate from the source material from time to time. You might just, unfortunately, be left scrambling to figure out what it all means if you don't know it's based off of this old book, because as it is, the movie feels pretty cryptic at times, and Kubrick, for better or for worse, does definitely have a reputation for being very intentional with a lot of his film's minor details. You know, film nerds will tell you that even stuff that appears to be mistakes is all actually very deliberate and pre-planned. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't mean that Eyes Wide Shut or The Shining or 2001: A Space Odyssey or anything else of his is a coded admission or anything like that, as some people claim. This is just a movie that I think, unfortunately, doesn't perfectly stick the landing of its central theme. But hey, you're perfectly free to have your own opinion. All art is arguably, in the end, just a pre-packaged set of metaphors and imagery that you can project meaning onto to help try and explain your own thinking. All the same, once again, my name's Card. If you might like to hear more from me, feel free to subscribe to this YouTube page, or just take a look at my other videos. Either way, thank you for listening and letting me talk about this movie for a little bit. Bye for now, and have a lovely day.